Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Operation DarkStar, Chapter 23 to Chapter 25, by Mark Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Chapter 23. They waited on the roof a long time, mesmerized by what was occurring in the streets below, unconsciously knowing that the moment they left the rooftop, they would once again become a part of the madness. Something large swooped overhead. They both ducked. A creature the size of a small plane. It flexed massive bat-like leathery wings, its body like a black lion, legs tucked in tight to the torso, its head obscured by the night sky. "What is that?" Kira whispered. "Nothing I want with us tonight," Saul said in awe. 7 figures scanned the police station from the relative safety of an alley across the road. Shrouded in darkness, they watched as ungodly beasts roamed the street. "I can't see any lights," Apache whispered. "I can't see lights anywhere save for the bloody fires," Bam Bam replied. "Lights. No lights. Those guns are still in there and we need them," Popeye reiterated. "This is a bad idea. I'd bet my last paycheck that there will be police inside. Lights or no lights. They won't simply hand the weapons over. Nor should they have to," Sarah said, with more than a little hint of anger in her voice. "Hey, lady, you chose to come with us. It's a bit late to be getting all high and mighty now, isn't it?" Bam Bam said. "I came because of the children, and coming here was a good idea. Not so you could loot and kill," Sarah said defiantly. "We don't even know if anyone inside is still alive," Popeye said diplomatically. "Maybe we should be having this conversation inside?" Apache said. Sarah didn't want to concede the point of being here, but she also didn't want the children outside, exposed to threats. "Fine, but by no means is this me condoning your intent," Sarah said. "Well now, since we're all under agreement on us getting into the station, has anyone got an actual idea on how we do it?" Bam Bam asked. "When I was in Somalia, we used to use diversions to lure out the enemy. Nothing fancy. I figure these dumb fucks will be even less refined in our approach," Popeye said. The 3 bikers retraced their steps back down the alley. Then, utilizing the fire escapes and roofs, they traversed the block until they were parallel to where Sarah and the kids were hidden. The paramedic under strict instructions to race the children across the road and into the police station. Apache and Bam Bam searched their immediate vicinity until they found something that would suit their needs. A 2008 Mercedes Vito. Popeye rigged the gas tank with a fuel-soaked rag, twisting it up as best he could so that it would act as a fuse. "So, is this what you did in Somalia?" Bam Bam said with a grin. "Pretty close smart ass, except it was a 74 Land Cruiser," Popeye replied. "Is she good to go?" Apache asked. "5 minutes tops until the tank blows. That with the alarm, it should bring every ugly within 3 blocks on top of it," Popeye said confidently. "Your seal of approval, eh?" Bam Bam smiled. "Better than the Surgeon General," Popeye replied as he clicked his Zippo and lit the rag. Sarah waited tensely with the children. It had only been 10 minutes since the others left, but it felt much longer. In her mind, she imagined the bikers had been killed, taken by the monsters. The responsibility of the children solely on her shoulders. She had agreed that if she hadn't heard from them in 20 minutes, she would take the children and find her own way in, although how she would accomplish that she wasn't sure. A loud boom shook her from her thoughts. This was followed immediately by a flash of intense light and the wailing of a car alarm. "They did it," Sarah whispered. They managed to get back to the others in less time than it took to leave, appropriate motivation clearly playing a contributing factor in their haste. They rounded a corner, and Popeye stumbled and fell. Bam Bam quick to scoop his brother in, arms up. "You all right?" Bam Bam asked. "Old man, I 'tis." "It's an accumulative thing. I'll be fine, though," Popeye grimaced. "Good to hear," Apache said, bringing up the rear. They crept up the alley to where Sarah and the children were taking refuge, the paramedic breathing a sigh of relief at their return. "I was about to give up on you three," Sarah said, tapping her watch. "Hey, rules are rules. The kids are the priority. We wouldn't expect anything less," Apache said. The moment the car's fuel tank had exploded, all creatures within a 200-meter radius had converged on the flaming car, all expecting an abundance of human flesh to consume. Confronted with the wailing Mercedes, hundreds of the beasts stood, transfixed by the burning white van, their appetites forgotten as they stared into the glowing flames. They watched the last of the monsters disappear towards the burning car. They then took a few seconds scanning the road, ensuring that their path to the police station was now clear. "Time's a-wasting," Bam Bam advised. Each member, except for Popeye, grabbing one of the kids and running towards the station house, the old biker hobbling behind as best as he could. Sarah was the first. She had the smallest boy under one arm, running for all she was worth. We're nearly there," she whispered. Apache and Bam Bam were close behind. They held their kids similarly to the paramedic. "Hurry up, old man," Apache called back through gritted teeth. Popeye was about to retort when his right knee simply gave way underneath. He rolled hard across the bitumen, grunted loudly from the tumble. Bam Bam was the first to hear it. Stopping in the road, he turned towards his friend. "What the hell are you doing?" Bam Bam started, his words freezing in his mouth. Something the size of a cow came lumbering up behind Popeye. It looked similar to a giant lizard, with goat-like horns and no eyes. It reared up on its back legs, balanced by a thick cable-like tail. The creature hissed and bared a wide mouth filled with dagger-length teeth. It happened so fast, Popeye was barely able to scream as the beast fell upon him. "No!" Bam Bam yelled in anger. He turned his assault rifle onto the beast and commenced firing. Apache followed suit, both men attempting to not hit their friend. The creature now had a firm hold of Popeye, its mouth clamping down hard on the older man's midsection, blood spraying as it thrashed its head from side to side. Sarah had reached the other side of the road, directly outside the police station. She watched on in horror as the biker was mauled, unable to do anything from her position. She attempted to shield the child's eyes from what was occurring. Still firing into the beast, they watched on helplessly as the monster started to drag their friend away. Even with the massive blood loss, Popeye had managed to hold on to consciousness, his upper body dragging on the ground. He managed to lock eyes onto Bam Bam and grin his final act of defiance. "No!" Bam Bam roared. His assault rifle clicked empty as the creature dragged Popeye away from view. Apache was immediately at his side. "We have to get him," Bam Bam growled. "We can't. He's gone," Apache replied. "I'll not leave him," Bam Bam insisted. The taller biker gripped his wrist. "We have to get the children to safety," Apache said. They could now hear the approach of other creatures. The car alarm they had set off was now silent, and the sounds of their skirmish had drawn attention to their predicament. "Don't waste his sacrifice. He would have been pissed as hell," Apache said. Bam Bam nodded, although he wasn't happy with the idea of running from a fight. Grabbing the children, they followed Sarah through the police station's front doors. Chapter 24. Her little body shook with each step he took. Paige slowly opened her eyes, the first thought crossing her mind was that she had fallen asleep on the train and that they had reached their destination. "Mommy," Paige whispered. This was followed by a huge yawn. When her vision finally cleared, there was darkness. The young girl began to panic. Everything was strange, alien. Then it all came flooding back to her. The train, running with her mother and Mr. Bloom, being attacked and having to leave her mother behind. Finally, the storm drain and the monsters that had come for her. She had thought she was dead, but she didn't die. There had been someone else. She stared down. A giant of a man had her thrown across one shoulder. The effort of carrying her seemed nothing to his large frame and muscles. She started to whimper, everything in her mind confusing and scary. Jared stopped. He had been walking for nearly an hour, heading towards the city. He had almost forgotten he had the child in his grasp, her size so slight. He placed the girl gently down on the ground. Her eyes were large and frightened. Jared placed his giant axe aside and held his empty hands up, in an attempt to show the young girl that he meant no harm. "Where am I?" Paige asked in a timid voice. Jared went to speak, but the words wouldn't come. "Where's my mommy?" Paige asked, her voice breaking with emotion. Again, Jared attempted to talk, but nothing happened. His frustration was written clearly on his face. "Why won't you say something?" Paige said, both annoyed and upset. Jared shrugged. It was at that moment the penny dropped, and a flood of understanding hit the young girl. "You can't talk, can you?" Paige asked. Jared's eyes welled up with tears. "Something bad happened to you too?" Paige asked the giant firefighter. The pain and memory a raw, fresh nerve that felt like a crushing blow to his very soul. "I lost someone too. My mum. Down in the dark. The monsters got her," Paige admitted. The young girl struggling to keep her emotions in check, her voice wavering, her bottom lip trembling. Jared placed his hand on her, the size difference ridiculous. Paige stared up at him, and she saw a man whose face was a mask of fierce determination. Words were not said, but an understanding made, on instinct alone. The young girl knew this giant would protect her. They remained hidden in a wooded area near the storm drain. Once Paige had rested, the giant picked her up and carried the girl in one arm, his oversized axe in the other. Jared's destination unclear, as the big ex-firefighter wouldn't talk. However, Paige was certain he had somewhere important in mind. They walked for what seemed hours. Paige was amazed at his strength. He never tired. He just walked on and on, only stopping when there was trouble, using his bulk, darkness, and whatever was around to shield the girl from the demons. When that didn't work, he dispatched the monsters using his rage and axe. The creatures never stood a chance. They just couldn't withstand his untamed ferocity. The battles were one-sided and over before they even began. Time had lost all meaning. Paige was sure that the night was over and day had begun, but there was no glow on the horizon, no sign of sunrise. Where was daylight? This question seemed to scare her more than all the monsters they had come across. Chapter 25. The man standing before monitors looked worried. Sergeant Bill Mears stood at a modest 5'6", but what he lacked in height, he made up for in an intensity that made many wary and nervous, fit and lean. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, a habit he had when anxious. "What is it?" a voice behind him said. Without turning, he tapped a key on the computer terminal, and the flashing red lights stopped immediately. "We've been breached," Mears said, pointing the monitors. There were 10 cameras in total, night vision capable. They showed the exterior of the building from every angle possible. On each monitor there were monsters roaming the perimeter, scaling the walls and walking the roof. They're not inside. They will find it hard attempting to breach our. Elm's words trailed off as one of the monitors suddenly showed nothing but static. What happened? Elms asked. Mears was punching code into the computer when another monitor went brutally offline. Shit, Mears growled. Both men were staring at the remaining screens. Creatures of nightmare were attempting to claw and batter their way into the building, with varying degrees of success. 2 more monitors went black. Elms reached for the radio mic on the table, flipped the switch, and spoke quickly. "We've been compromised," Elms said, and tossed the mic back onto the table. "Our lid is a secret no more," Elms added. The 4 of them were navigating the corridors when Elms's message came blaring over the PA system. "What does that mean, Mommy?" Rosalind asked. "I think that the monsters have found their way inside the building," Bethany asked. Her children were shocked by her candor. "Don't be scared. Scott will keep us safe," Bethany added. It wasn't just her words that gave comfort, but the children could see that their mother meant what she said. "I'll do my best," Scott said with certainty. He knew that he couldn't let them down. For the first time in his life, the word failure was not an option he dared contemplate. Scott led them around the corner and came face to face with Corporal Breen, her face just as shocked as his. Her weapon was slung, and she was carrying an ammo tin in both hands. She dropped them both with the intent of reaching for her firearm. With years of combat experience and training, she was fast and deadly, but even so, her reflexes and skills weren't even close to the Delta operative. Scott closed the distance between them swiftly, striking the woman in the throat, just hard enough to stun, then conducting a judo hip toss, brought the woman to the ground, the impact knocking her out cold. "Whoa," Tommy said, impressed, as Scott liberated Corporal Breen's compact assault rifle from her shoulder and ammunition from her possession. "We need to move quick. This place is under attack. The others are going to have their hands full. They will keep the beasts busy as we make our escape," Scott said. "Shouldn't we help them?" Rosalind asked. "This is a hard thing to explain, but these people are secret keepers. That's all they care about. Everything else is an inconvenience. That includes us. Even with everything else going on around them, you would think that helping us would matter. But it doesn't," Scott said. "That's really sad," Rosalind replied. "The worst, but you have your family. That's 1,000 times better than their precious secrets," Scott said, dragging Breen into a nearby room, then dropping her with a thud when he saw what it contained. Dozens of crates, stacked from the floor to the ceiling. They bore 2 types of symbols. One was a black circle with shattered lines erupting out. The other symbol was a black sun with a red lightning bolt within its interior. "What are they?" Bethany asked. Scott grabbed one of the first crates and cracked it open. Inside it held dozens of grenades. "High explosive," Scott said, loading up his tactical vest with as many as he could carry. "Inside these other boxes," Scott said, pointing to the emblem on the second box, "are what's known as Black Sun. They are the next evolution beyond composition C. C4, plastic explosive, highly malleable, twice the explosive capability and 5 times the heat intensity. A little goes a long, long way. What you're looking at here is enough to turn Yankee Stadium to gravel," Scott said in held awe. Bethany, on the other hand, looked towards her children with barely concealed panic. "Oh my God, what do we do?" she said in a hushed whisper. "We take one of the crates with us," Scott said, grabbing the nearest one and lifting it away from the others. "What in God's name for?" Bethany replied, her voice becoming shrill. "Because I think we're going to need it," Very soon, Scott said. They continued on further down the corridor. They had been blindfolded when they had been brought in, so Scott had no way of knowing exactly where they were inside the complex. For all he knew, they were 10 stories below ground level, behind a dozen security-locked doors, with no way of getting through any of them. The building shook as something large and powerful beat its way into the roof of the building. Scott could feel that it wasn't too far above where they were now. Bethany saw him smile. "Why are you so happy?" Bethany asked, not bothering to hide the irritation in her voice. "I think I might know a way out," Scott said. Automatic gunfire erupted nearby, and despite every other instinct in his body screaming that he should run towards it, his brain was ticking over. Survival options that now included Bethany and her children. "Stay low and behind me," Scott instructed, as he led them towards the sounds of fighting. Rounding a corner, they were confronted by Major Elms and his people in an intense battle against the demon horde. It was a large storage area, surrounded by an extensive steel catwalk, which the soldiers were using as the monsters poured in from one of the lower corridors. The 3 men using heavy-caliber weapons with pinpoint accuracy, directing their fire with devastating effect. Scott stopped, keeping them all out of sight. He watched the battle unfold. The creatures that had managed to batter their way in looked like a cross between a wolf and a spider, their numbers great. Sergeant Founder was wielding a belt-fed machine gun, its barrel slowly turning red from heat as the big man depressed the trigger and turned the muzzle into the oncoming creatures. They exploded into black mist under his constant onslaught. Sergeant Mears's assault rifle clicked empty, not wasting a second. He tossed the rifle to the side and scooped up an automatic shotgun, a 50-round drum magazine already locked and loaded. Shoving the butt into his shoulder, he fired the heavy 12-gauge slugs into anything that moved, the powerful rounds destroying everything they hit. "Now is our chance to leave," Bethany hissed. The advice was sound. It wasn't just his life now. He had 3 others that were completely dependent on him too, but instincts that had been forged in combat over many years prevented him deserting a fellow soldier. "We help us by helping them," Scott said. "Stay back," he added, and joined in with the attack. Reflexes honed in one of the most elite special forces units in the world, Scott started shooting the monsters, double-tapping every beast that raised its ugly head. With 4 soldiers now fighting the hordes, they were starting to repel the creatures. "What the hell is he doing here?" Founder yelled over the roar of his machine gun. "You're really going to bitch about the assistance with the heavy lifting?" Mears growled. Founder's reply was with another heavy-caliber burst, his face showing his true feelings. The bodies of the demons were piling up, that coupled with their combined defense were slowing the attack considerably. "Keeping pouring it on," Elms instructed. "We need to pull back to a better defendable position," Scott insisted. Now it was Elms's turn to be annoyed with the newcomer. "This is my house, don't be telling me how to defend it. We were fine." Elm's words were cut short. A deafening silence louder than any roar took a hold of the compound. A quiet before the storm. They all looked around at each other, unsure of what it signified. Although Scott felt an icy fear grip his stomach, he turned towards Bethany and her children and gave them his most assured grin, hoping they wouldn't see the disguise. Then it happened. The roof above them opened up. A large, jagged hole presenting the eternally night sky beyond. They all stopped and stared, their imaginations running wild with the concept of what on earth could have wreaked such carnage. They didn't have to wait long. An eye nearly as big as the hole itself peered in. Scott had a brief moment to think about the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, and about what he had to say about staring into the abyss. This wasn't a theological ideal about confronting evil and being changed by it. This was a tangible, real thing, and if he wasn't careful, it would end his existence. These things raced through his brain in less than a second, and as he yelled a warning to the others, he could see the creature's hellish mouth. Then it was gone, hidden from view by the arrival of more creatures, more than he could count, or even estimate. Spider-wolf hybrids, with glowing red eyes and ravenous, hungry mouths. Inhuman screams filled the cavern as they came pouring in, eager to kill and eat. Elms and Founder were quick to recommence their attack. Then a thought occurred to Scott, an idea that might save them when all the bullets in the compound couldn't. He turned and ran towards Bethany. "Where are you going?" Elms called out, his heart sinking at the sight of the fleeing Scott. "Coward," Founder sneered. Scott raced back to Bethany, her eyes wide. "What are we going to do?" The mother of two hissed. She had watched the events unfold, her terror and dread growing exponentially with the threat they now faced. Scott ignored her, focusing his entire attention upon the crate with the black sun on its side, the one he had liberated from the room earlier. He was quick to flick open the latches and expose the contents. Inside it looked like a slab of pale gray clay. Freeing several of the grenades inside his vest, he twisted two directly into the soft contents. The third, he twisted off the top of the grenade, now exposing the detonator, which he also inserted into the explosive clay. "Get back to that room where we found this and get low," Scott ordered. "Until when?" Bethany asked. "Until I come for you," Scott said with a determined face. Bethany took his cue, grabbing her kids and racing back down the corridor. The box was about 1 foot long and 1/2 foot wide, weighing no more than 8 pounds. Scott looked back towards the other soldiers. They were barely hanging on, the threat too large and too vast. The monsters swarming the giant storage area. They were seconds away from being run over. Scott ran back, lugging the crate. Standing on the edge of the steel catwalk, the Delta operator pulled the pin on the exposed grenade, the small spring kicking the arming lever into the air. Scott hoisted the crate into his shoulder, and like a shot putter, he heaved the small crate into the seething black mass below. "Fire in the hole!" Scott screamed, diving away from the catwalk. 4. Elms saw what was occurring. 3. "Take cover!" Elms yelled. 2. The 3 soldiers also turned and dived. 1. The crate landed amongst the creatures. For the smallest moment, not even a second. Nothing happened. The monsters continued their climb towards the humans. Then the crate exploded. Searing heat and blinding light tore through the small room. The demonic horde were incinerated within the explosion, their combined screams extinguished in a second. The 3 soldiers clung to the steel catwalk as it was rocked by the shockwave. Metal was torn and bent, but the soldiers held on for dear life. Scott opened his eyes and looked up, the glow of the explosion already fading to darkness. The Delta operator was quick to climb to his feet. He looked back towards where the creatures had been. The warehouse was still except for the burning remains of the monsters scattered everywhere. He was about to call out to the others when he heard a loud groan, scanning the still intact steel catwalk. He saw a large figure slowly stand. It was Sergeant Founder. The heavily muscled soldier stood alone on the catwalk, grinning from ear to ear. "Woohoo! Did you see that shit? Those motherfuckers ain't got nothing!" Founder roared. Grasping his weapon tight, he turned towards Mears, who was slowly getting to his feet, the shorter soldier staring up with disdain. "Keep your fool mouth shut," Mears grumbled, although the larger man would not be humbled. Thumping his chest, the exhilaration of surviving an attack that should have meant certain death. Despite themselves, Elms and Mears grinned, the intense feeling of overcoming impossible odds infectious. "Look out," Scott warned, his vantage point allowing the Delta operator the ability to see all too clearly what was happening. One of the creatures had somehow managed to survive the explosion, and even with several of its legs burnt and damaged by the intense heat, it had climbed the side of the steel scaffolding beneath the feet of Sergeant Founder. Confused Founder looked down over the edge of the catwalk just as the beast leapt up. Two 12-inch-long fangs reared back, then shot forth, striking the large soldier in the chest. Founder barely had time to react as the fangs tore into his flesh, tearing through bone and muscle. An explosion of blood and gore splashed across the face of Mears, who could only look on in shock. The beast was now climbing onto the catwalk. Founder hung limp in its jaws. The creature tossed the dead soldier over the edge and out of view. It now turned its attention to the others. Elms hefted his automatic weapon into his shoulder and fired the action, only to hear it click uselessly in return. He attempted to rectify the stoppage as the creature scuttled towards them. Scott could see the beast close in on its prey, and neither Elms nor Mears was in a position to stop it. Scott raised his own weapon and fired. 3 slugs struck the beast in the throat. Thick black blood poured out. The creature was dead instantaneously. However, its momentum kept it moving as it slid across the walkway, nearly a ton of solid muscle and bone colliding with the 2 soldiers. Scott could hear the sickening sound as the 2 men disappeared from view. The Delta operator was quick to reach them. Using every ounce of his strength, he pushed the monster onto its side, immediately dismayed to find Sergeant Mears lying at an impossible angle, his neck broken from the impact, his eyes staring up blankly. "Elms, can you hear me?" Scott asked as he rolled the other figure. Elms cried out. Scott felt relief wash over him. This then turned to alarm. There was something not quite right about how the Major was laying. Elms's eyes were wide, his breathing shallow, a fine sheen of perspiration on his face. "Can you move?" Scott asked. "No," Elms grunted, the effort to speak almost too great. "Try not to panic. I'll make a brace and get you." "Forget it. My back is broken. I'm done," Elms said suddenly. "Keep it together. I'll get you out of here," Scott said. "And take me where?" "What we're seeing is the beginning of the end," Elms said. He started to cough violently, the effort causing the Major excruciating pain. Dark blood was dribbling down his chin. A sign of internal bleeding, Scott thought, but didn't say. "Something is wrong? I can feel it. You know it too. I can see it in your eyes," Elms said, coughing again, the blood coming faster and thicker. Elms's eyes were beginning to glaze over. In his mind, Scott didn't disagree with Major Elms. However, it was a bitter pill to swallow. He was about to try and reassure the Major. "Listen to me," Elms said, an urgent, aggressive tone to his voice. "Get the woman and her kids." Another coughing fit gripped the Major. This lasted longer than previous. It took him a great effort before he could continue. "There is an exit in the east section." Elms could see frustration in Scott's eyes. Despite the blinding pain racking his body, Elms smiled. "Make your way to the center of town, the old Heisman building. The right-hand elevator, use the key around my neck and press down," Elms instructed. "Where does the elevator go?" Scott asked as he removed a steel chain from around the Major's neck. A single unusual shaped key attached like a pendant. The image of an eye inside a pyramid, Scott placed it over his own head. It's a bunker, one of 10 strategically placed around the country. I had strict orders to bring it in when I received the call, Elms said. His breath was now ragged and labored. Scott guessed he was nearly out of time. That time has passed. No one will be calling, and more importantly, I won't be alive to answer it. Get that family to safety, maybe. Just maybe you might make good use of it, Elms wheezed. How big? Scott asked, his mind racing with possibilities. It will house 30 people for 18 months. Water, food, medicine, and power, Elms said. Blood was now running freely from his mouth and nose. This was too good to be true, Scott thought, then felt guilty. I'm sorry. I wish there was something I could do for you, Scott said awkwardly. I have no regrets. I have no family. The service to my country was my life, Elms said. Scott nodded his approval, but inside he was thinking that in the big scheme of things, it was nothing, and what made matters worse was the fact it mirrored his own life. The building was shaken once again, and in the distance, Scott could hear the sounds of more creatures in the distance. They're getting close, Elms said, struggling to suppress another coughing fit. Scott's dilemma was clear. Don't let them get me, Elms said suddenly. Scott's jaw tensed. May you be in heaven a full half hour before the devil knows you're dead, Scott said, and placed his open hand over the mouth and nose of Major Elms. The commander of the facility closed his eyes and let the Delta operator close off his airway. Seconds passed and nothing happened. Then there was a moment of panic. Despite his knowing and, more importantly, desiring to die, primal instincts fought against the hand that was forcing his demise. Elms's body shook and shuddered as it silently screamed for precious air. Scott held on tight. He had killed many men in the field, a necessity of war. He never took pleasure in the act. It was just something that needed to be done. It was either kill or be killed. This thing he was being forced to do now was also a necessity, but it was a comrade, a brother in arms, and there was nothing he could do. Major Elms's thrashing stopped. Scott looked down at the major. He looked like he was sleeping. In death, he had found peace. Scott was quick to find Bethany and her kids. They had made their way back to where they had left Corporal Megan Breen, the mother of two, nursing the former antagonist on the floor. They all looked up as Scott entered. We need to leave. Now, Scott said. Bethany looked up, then down at Breen. The others are dead, Scott said bluntly, regretting his tact immediately, but also acutely aware that time was not on their side. Breen looked up, shocked and angry. Scott could see that the young corporal was weighing up her choices, one of which was to continue her fight with the Delta operator. It wasn't at my hand. He did give me this, though, Scott said, showing the key that now hung around his neck. Breen looked at the key, then Scott. Her eyes narrowed. He said we should get to the old Heiseman building. He wanted us to all get to the bunker. Scott pressed. Breen's body softened, a mixture of knowing that her team was now dead, but also aware that if her commander was willing to trust this man with his most important secret, so should she. I'll get us out of here, but you're going to give me a gun first. Trust, show it, give it, and I'll reciprocate, Breen replied. Scott liked her no-nonsense attitude. Reaching behind his back, he pulled out a pistol, a black automatic. Showing Breen that it was loaded, he tossed it towards the young soldier. Breen was quick to check the magazine, then pull the slide back, ensuring that it was locked and loaded. We need to head east. There is only one way out. I pray that these Things haven't corrupted it yet, Breen growled. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope Operation DarkStar has drawn you deeper into its enigma. Return soon to Crow's Quill's books, where the next chapter awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.